Okay, wonderful. Thanks all for joining. It's a new online Scrum Caretakers meetup session. Um, as I started doing these things again a few sessions ago, last month, I was sort of counting how many I've already done, so I can now sort of sum them up. So it seems that this is number 18. I was just even this week thinking, so oh my God, I only took like 2 digits for it. But before I end up from 18 until 99 and run into problems, it'll probably be the end of my life anyhow. So that's how long it's going to take. So cool. Thanks for joining. Last week I shared my story about how my life started with my life of Scrum started with extreme programming. I think really important things, engineering standards, development practice, whatever you want to call it. I've got two more stories to share about. In the end, sort of what I call the recurring theme of it is what I like to see as naivety, um, and that's therefore the theme or the topic of today's sessions. Two more stories about my naivety and how naivety actually was really important. And naivety is almost the opposite of overthinking. Uh, and that is very strange for me to say because I'm totally overthinker. I overthink things all the time. I want to know what's going on. I want to have control. I have difficulties letting go. And still, most important things in my life as Scrum, I've learned in some sort of naivety. And after last week's sessions about extreme programming, I wanted to think for myself about what what does it make people leave during my session? So because I noticed at the start of the session there were a lot more people present than at the end of the session. I was thinking about it, and like I just said, I think we have a lot of people in the world of Scrum, thanks to the massive adoption of Scrum, people that want to know what to do, that want to be told what to do. And I thought back of my little book. That was a session before this Scrum Caretakers meetup session. It was session 16, by the way. And I remember in my book, I've introduced a word. I've used it twice. First of all, as part of the Agile movement, but also part of Scrum, that I think is really, really important. So in my book, I've added a little text about why we don't call Scrum a methodology, but why we call it a framework. And it might be sometimes difficult to explain because there's nothing wrong with a methodology. It's used in science, it's a methodological approach, it's a structured whatever approach. There's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that a methodology in the world of IT and software development is not what we like a lot. Because it's what I said in my book, Scrum is the opposite of a methodology is then such a big collection of interwoven mandatory components, instructions, and so on, prescriptions. In that sense, Scrum is not a methodology. Um, Scrum replaces such things, what I call pre-programmed algorithmic approach, fixed steps to follow, things to handle, and so on. And I said Scrum replaces it with a heuristic approach. And that is for me really important. Within that heuristic approach, it's with respect for the fact that it's all about people, self-organizing people that are the best way to deal with unpredictability and so on. And it's just a word, heuristic. It's just a word in my book. It comes back 2 times, but it's really, really important because it also defines um, why I do these types of sessions, storytelling. It defines how I teach. It defines how I try to facilitate people's learning. It defines how I do consulting and coaching with people. It's really important. So I always try to make that then sort of clear by looking up the words in dictionaries and then try to explain it. And what does the dictionary says about heuristics? So heuristics meaning that it's a method of solving problems by finding practical ways of dealing with them. Finding practical ways of dealing with them. Learning by doing stuff, learning for yourself, learning from past experience. And I truly believe It's at least that's what I see as one of the biggest powers of Scrum is that we thrive on people's willingness and ability and eagerness to learn by doing. It also has to do with that idea of the rules of the game. You can only learn to play the game by going out there, go on the pitch and play. Fall, get back up, lose, do something differently, stop, reflect, and so on. It will never be from reading the cookbook or some sort of blueprint or whatever menu. So that's really important. And these types of storytelling session that I'm going to do is all building on this belief. I will tell you my story. I'll tell you what to do. I hope you pick up something from it. I hope you will try to learn for yourself. I hope, like Andrea, you said, you will try to challenge people around you and help people in this way too. Not by telling them what to do, but by asking questions, by triggering them, by provoking them. That is really important. It's for me all part of the fact that Scrum is all about heuristics. It's about heuristic learning. It's about heuristic um, um, practice, let's say. That's really important. So in last week's sessions, so you could say naivety is a way of applying that heuristic method because it means don't overthink, don't spend half a year reading through all types of books and instructions, guide and manuals and so on before you start doing that. It's not always the easy way, but throughout my career, I've noticed for myself personally, I also do this with new software. If I buy a new tool or a software tool, or many years ago, I've tried to shift from using Microsoft tools to Apple tools. This is still Microsoft PowerPoint, but I haven't used Microsoft Excel a lot. I'm now using Numbers a lot from Apple. And I just want to open up the thing and figure it out and try out stuff and do stuff. I would never do that by trying to read the manual. Uh, which is also the funny thing with in our world, IT software development with manual, user manuals. We all know we have to create them. People expect it, but we cannot expect people to read it. So as it's just that sort of conundrum with user manuals. So and in last week's sessions I talked about last week's session I talked about how fortunate that my life of Scrum started with XP, extreme programming. I've told the story. You can look it up on YouTube. I've added the link in the PowerPoint, which I will then share again as a PDF. But I wanna just repeat my most important lessons from that. And that is intrinsic motivation. Nothing beats intrinsic motivation. So in my early years, I call them my early years, I also call them my formative years. We just started with extreme programming. There was a crisis. We had to do something. We had to deliver, project what hadn't started yet, but we were already late. Um, so we just did it without thinking. And I hope you remember from last week that I told you that I only started reading about it because I had to prepare for a official presentation at Java Poles in December 2003. But afterwards, I had to think about a lot what made those first years so beautiful. Intrinsic motivation. People really wanted this. People were excited. They wanted to do that. They didn't care about their job titles. We really acted as a whole team together. And we had, thanks to extreme programming, very clear and agreed development standards or development practices in place. Remember, test first development, pair programming, multiple times a day, continuous integration. Overnight, we did our own performance testing. We created all the tests and maintained the test suites with the one and same team. We had functional testing within the group. We didn't use those terms, but I probably most often acted as a scrum master, but also sometimes as a product owner. We had functional people in the team that maybe sometimes towards the team took over that sort of product owner perspective from me. And it flowed. There was flow. It was fluent. There was some sense of fluidity, which was really, really beautiful. So that was sort of my lessons from that. But in the end, we started in a really naive way. Now, a very, very important step at some point of time for me was so because remember 2003 until 2007, by the end of 2010, I had this crazy idea of wanting to become a professional Scrum trainer. Because up to that point, I had my CSM class in 2004, May 2004. Ken Schwaber was already working on sort of, let's say, career paths within the Scrum Alliance. You could by then become a CSP, CS whatever, and up to CST. I couldn't care less. I had no interest at all. I was just applying Scrum. But went through some sort of business or professional troubles in 2008, 2009, not sure what to do. In the end, always went back to Scrum, which to save my life again. I had sort of managerial ambitions at some point of time, didn't work out, felt bad, whatever, went back to Scrum. And in early 2010, I went to work for Capgemini in Belgium because they were a member of what was called the Agile Consortium, which was mainly a Dutch organization, but I had a chapter here in Belgium. And I felt like, oh my God, Capgemini is member of the Agile Consortium, must mean that they believe in it. Not really sure about that anymore, but at least that got me into working for Capgemini. And around the same time, I was focusing on Scrum again full time. Also bringing that into Capgemini around that time. And in 2010, there was some sort of stability within the young organization that Scrum.org was, because they had Scrum.org was founded in the fall of 2009 by Ken Schwaber. I was by accident I caught up with that. I was following it from the early days on. I've seen all the attempts of Ken creating assessments and fooling around with naming and so on because it didn't exist. That is heuristics too, by the way. Just doing, applying, trying, experimenting, and so on. No big plans. He was just on the fly, almost like sort of in production, figuring out what to do with this. So in 2010, there was some sort of stability. He settled for the professional Scrum branding. I learned afterwards, by the way, that was because he had some sort of legal agreement with the Scrum Alliance that he couldn't call anything certified. And then in the end, they made an agreement that the Scrum Alliance wouldn't call anything that they would do in professional Scrum. So that the clear agreement, legal agreement on the branding. And he had his assessments out. And I think in June 2010, I decided to go for the assessment. And there was by then two assessments. There was PSM1 and there was PSM2. And I was I don't know, very eager, probably very impatient. I'm ugh, terrible at being patient. So I was very impatient. I went through PSM1, had direct my result, which was fairly good. I hadn't studied. I hadn't looked back at anything. I just felt like with 2010, been doing this since for 7 years now. If I can't make it just like that, uh, why would I even bother? What's that sort of thinking? Which is pretty foolish in the end, but still, I went for it. Made my PSM1, immediately went for PSM2. As paid for it myself, I was working at Gemini, but I didn't want to be dependent on my employer for that. So I totally went for it. It took several weeks for my PSM2 assessment to be graded by Ken. Very impatient, sent several mails asking for it. He probably got very, very tired of my pushing for it. And in the end, I think it was in October 2010 that I got the news from Ken, okay, you're okay to move on and on the path of becoming a PSD, professional Scrum Trainer. So in December 2010, I went to Zurich in Switzerland for attending a PSM class with Ken Schwaber. I did organize that via Capgemini, so they paid for it, so cool. And around the same time, there was this a strange thing happening in the Netherlands. So I was living in Antwerp, Belgium here. And there was a lot of Scrum demand for in the Netherlands. It seemed I found out. And what was happening? So Capgemini in the Netherlands, 7,000 people big, had nobody with reasonable, whatever knowledge, experience, insights into Scrum. But there was a lot of demand, and certainly in the financial world, banks, insurance companies, and so on, they were sort of bombarding Capgemini and others with questions about Scrum. And then the funny thing is, big organizations, Capgemini had to look sort of at a global level. Is there anybody within Capgemini globally that has some knowledge about Scrum? And they found my name. And then the strange thing is, I don't know if you recognize this from large organizations, direct contact seems to be really, really difficult. So Capgemini Netherlands, for whatever reason, they found out there's a guy working at Capgemini Belgium who knows about Scrum. Oh, we see that Capgemini Belgium is a member of the Agile Consortium. So they contacted the Agile Consortium in the Netherlands to ask for the contact person of Capgemini Belgium of the Agile Consortium. Crazy things. But in the end, they found me. Um, by the end of December 2010, I went over to see my colleagues in the Netherlands. Me, small Belgian guy with no arrogant, direct communication, straightforward, whatever. Brave Dutch people. I don't know if you know them. Biplab, you should in the meantime, I guess. So really, really great. I went over there. I did an introduction. By then, I was not a PST yet. I was still on my way, but I've done lots of informal, whatever workshops around Scrum. So I had plenty of material to show. And in no time, there was interest. And in January 2011, we started doing internal workshops at Capgemini in the Netherlands. And some really smart decision, but I don't know who took it, that we were informing or teaching, whatever, instructing, whatever. A lot of account people first. So account managers and salespeople that were connected to those big customers. So not really consultants, just a few consultants with it. And in a way, that was a smart move looking back. And in the spring of that year, 2011, I was working on multiple things. In the meantime, I had gone to that PSM class of Ken. By the way, very funny. I went to that PSM class in December 2010, and it was maybe I'm probably not endangering anybody, but it was sort of almost exactly the same material as the CSM class that I attended in May 2004. So 6 years and a half, and so I recognize lots of stuff, but still a great class and connecting with Ken. But I think Ken didn't know what to think of me because I am actually really introvert. So put me on a stage, fine. Put me in front of a class, and I'll sort of explode. But put me in the class itself, or put me in a group of listening to a speaker, and I will sit in the back, in the dark corner, whatever. And that sort of because I'm mainly an introvert person. So also in that class with Ken, probably had no idea what to think of me. But that changed in the spring of that year because the biggest client that really wanted to go for this story of Scrum was ING. So the big Dutch bank. Um, and that was in the spring of 2011. Another thing that happened in the spring of 2011 was actually looking back, was a funny one. So I had invited Ken to come to Belgium and for a speaking engagement for the Agile Consortium of Belgium. And I think that was end of March or maybe beginning of April 2011. And he had agreed, he had connected a PSM class to that. I didn't attend that. He connected a trainer meeting attached to that in Brussels and so on. So he came to speak at the Agile Consortium. It was an evening session. But I picked Ken and his wife Chris up from their hotel shortly after lunchtime, and we spent the afternoon just chatting in the bar of the hotel where the speaking session was going to happen in the evening. I don't think we talked a lot about Scrum. We talked about personal things, life, whatever, visiting countries and touristic things and so on. It was really, really cool. In the evening, he did a session, and shortly after the session, he contacted me again. He was still in let's say, around the neighborhood, whatever. And he said, Gunther, you know what? In April 2011, I've got a beta version of a new class planned. It's happening in Amsterdam. I would like you to attend. And so that was, he had been developing a new class, which we now know as the PSPO class, the Professional Scrum Product Owner class. And he was doing a couple of beta training sessions for normally only for trainers and people that he knew and trusted. So he invited me into that beta session for the PSPO class in Amsterdam. So I went back to my manager, Capgemini. I said, "Oh, unique opportunity, whatever. I can attend this class." And my manager said, "No, no, Gunther, not possible because you know what? You've just been to a class in December, traveled to Zurich, and so on. No, sorry, Capgemini is not. No, not possible." Oh no, oh, really? Well, lots of things were happening, so I had to think about it, send a mail back to Ken. Sorry, Capgemini is not willing to pay for my class. Not sure what to do. And he sent me immediately a mail back. No problem, you can attend for sort of a minimal fee or whatever. Went back to my manager. I got this big discount, whatever, minimal fee. No, sorry, Gunther, not possible. And I said, no, whatever you guys. I want to attend this class. This is unique chance. So I took days off and I went to Amsterdam. I booked a hotel myself. I paid for the thing myself. I didn't have to pay for the class for Ken. So I told him, Ken, sorry, company's not paying for it, but I still want to join. I will be there. He said, okay, then you can come for free. Obviously, I had to pay for the hotel and whatever the transport, whatever. So I did that, and so after that, he licensed me as a PST for both the PSM class as well as the PSPO class. And now the big thing, obviously, the big surprise is who took the most money from the fact that I was becoming a PST? That same company that denied me, obviously, the chance to attend that class. That's how it works with large organizations sometimes. Whatever. So I became a PST, and around that time, trying to work with lots of people that were working with ING. Now, to give you some background, maybe what had happened at ING. So I think somewhere middle of the financial crisis. I don't know if you're old enough to know about that. Around you go, boys and girls, in the years of 2008, 2009, previous century almost, there was a big financial crisis hitting. Yeah, you still remember. And what happened, I think, around that time, there was a guy, Amir Aruni. He became the CIO of a certain department at ING. He'd been climbing the ladder. Now, to be clear, um, Amir was one of the three and later on four CIOs, actually five, because every department had a CIO. Now, Amir's department was about 800 people. Was IT department. They did mainly IT and development work, and it was called something like channels or so. And so he was a CIO. There were next to him there were two, and later on three other CIOs also managing a sort of organizational line, let's say. And on top of them, there was sort of the real CIO. I think by then Ron van Kemenade, who managed the four other CIOs. So Amir had become the CIO of Channels, I believe it was called. So they made applications for mainly, I think, for internal purposes, for their help desk, for their support things, for people to use internally, I think, with 800 people. And Amir, when they started seeing a little light at the end of the financial crisis tunnel. It felt like Amir, smart guy, said, you know what? I remember in the decade before this, and let's say the decade before the financial crisis, we've done lots of things at ING. We've tried lean. We've worked a lot with Prince 2 types of things, like big governance and big methodologies and so on. We've gone through lots of things. It didn't really help. We're now able to think about the future again rather than just fighting the crisis. And Amir, smart guy, realized we can't just go back to the old ways of working. They didn't work by then. They will not help us build a future-proof ING. And that was sort of supported by research that Amir had been launching. And that research showed him, demonstrated that, oh my God, we're living in sort of big culture of bureaucracy. That means for every little medium type of work, let's call it a project, an endeavor, whatever, for anything we need to get delivered out there, the average time it takes us is 11 months. On average, it includes or it involves 47 people from 25 departments. And in the end, we have to produce no less than 70 deliverables, of which only one is working software. All the other things are documents and paper and bureaucracy and so on, meeting reports, whatever, evidence, quality assurance, documents, and so on. And Amir was, oh my God, this is not going to help us. And then one of the beautiful things that he did, he sent out a mail to his department, 800 people, asking for help. Imagine, CIO, 800 people sending out a mail, okay, guys, help me out. These are our findings. This is not going to help us thrive in the future, let's say. And there was almost the vast majority of the people that responded, and Dutch people, they do respond. They don't care whether it's CIO, they will respond. And there was a lot of vast majority saying Scrum. And that's how Amir ended up with Capgemini asking for Scrum. That's how they ended up with me. So in the spring of that year, 2011, I checked in with Ken again. He shared something that he had. He called it a playbook, sort of a Scrum playbook, how to approach in a way a transformation of an organization before it was even called Agile transformations, because that term, that idea wasn't hip, that wasn't the hype just yet. He had a playbook for that. So I read that, could use that. And the idea was to work with the four CIOs of ING. So we started doing that, workshops, and very soon, it became clear that only Amir really wanted this. The three other CIOs were just attending the workshop because they know that their upper CIO, the Uber CIO, was watching over and expected them to attend the workshops, but they were really collaborating and so on. So we just scaled down and we just went on to work with Amir because he really, really wanted it. So and what did we do? So we took it, and that was sort of one of my most important lessons, naivety. I had no experience working at that scale. I had done Scrum for 7, 8 years in a row. Um, Looking back, that helped me build up being firmly rooted in Scrum the way it is supposed to be. Um, so I could, in a way, stand my ground. So I still remember us the first pilots starting them again in the first half year of 2011, all in a very short time span. It was called Lisa Kerklas. Those are Dutch terms that were the applications that we were building. Um, they were already being built by a mixed team of Capgemini people, ING people, and Capgemini people in India. So that was already a mixed team. They were doing something that looked like unified process a little bit. So sort of iterative way of working already. And we converted that to Scrum. And that was really, really, really beautiful. The picture you see on the screen is, I had to look that up, but I sort of keep track of about everything. That was an old picture from that team. And I don't know if you can see it on the picture. This is the team in Amsterdam, in a building of Capgemini. It has people from ING and Capgemini working there full time together. And somewhere in the back is a little TV that is connected to the team in India. So this is probably around the daily Scrum, and they've got the camera pointed at the whiteboard, the Scrum board, so that the team in India knew what was happening. And then once the people in the Netherlands had been doing that, they turned that around, and then the people in India did it. And that worked like a charm. It was really beautiful. I don't know. I wasn't actively involved. I helped them. I was available for questions. I was not a scrum master. I was not even a really coach for them. But in no time, they were able to deliver stuff in 6 to 9 weeks' time. So imagine that. So they come from an average elapsed time of, at least for that type of work, 3 to 6 months, sometimes even later. And in no time with Scrum, we went to being able to release every 6 to 9 weeks. That meant every 2 to 3 sprints we could actually deliver. Um, After those releases, they noticed that there were far more less incidents, no more bugs, less defects, and so on. And they also noticed a big increase in almost engagement of people, professionalism, and that sort of people just being re-energized. That was really beautiful. So by the way, on the bottom of the screen, you'll see that's a link to a paper that I wrote about it together with Amir. The lessons that we took from doing that, we wrote that by the end of 2012. So really, really amazing. And obviously, as these things go, um, once it got clear within ING that Amir's department was so much better and faster and higher quality, less defects and so on, engaged people, then obviously the other CIOs also had to do it now. Not because they wanted, but now they were really, really forced to do it. But that's another thing. So we started with this first team, this first almost pilot project in 2011. And a year later, um, in 2012, we had sort of scaled up by adding projects and a new project and a new team and so on. So we started Lisa Kaklas and another team and another project and other products and so on. So as you can see on the screen in the graph, gradually by a year later, a majority of the releases being done by Amir's department were done by teams that were applying Scrum. So it was really, really beautiful, but still took a year time. By the end of that year, by the end of 2012, all delivery was done through Scrum, 800 people. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to create that paper by the end of 2012 with Amir is I wanted to sort of make sure that this information wouldn't get lost for the future generations, let's say. Why? Because by then, obviously, Ron van Kemenade, the Uber CIO, wanted everybody to do Scrum, given the amazing results of these things. Those other CIOs, honestly, were still not too enthusiastic about it. By now, they were like their arms were twisted and they were forced to do it anyhow. But also, in the meantime, throughout this gradual evolution or spreading of Scrum through Amir's department, there was also movements about making this really the standard way of working at ING. That meant they were rethinking regulations and processes and procedures within ING, and that meant that they went really far in it meant that ING at some point of time decided that everybody within IT, and by that time, the IT department of ING, this is the business to consumer branch of ING, so not the business to business types of things, but just let's say for the regular silly peasants like us who might have a bank account and so on. So within that department, I think by then there were about 5,000 people at least working in IT, and ING by then was the biggest IT employer of the Netherlands. So really huge. We had converted 800 people, let's say, to go from waterfall thinking and then delivering all software to Scrum. The business was not really connected yet. I'm going to assume that Amir will not be watching this, but I still remember one of Amir's statements towards me at some point of time when we talked about product ownership, and it looked me straight in the face and honestly said, Gunther, you don't really expect me to put the faith of my IT people into the hands of the business, do you? That was sort of his idea of a product owner from the business side of the organization. So it was still too early. But they had all of their IT people go through a process of reapplying within ING for a new job because they were eliminating job titles and function titles and so on, replacing them with Scrum titles, product owners, and so on. But one of the things also they felt like we have to set the next step in this way of agile. And Amir, a truly IT guy in heart and mind, he wanted to go for DevOps. He said, you know what, DevOps, that is sort of the new way, the new generation of Scrum. So they had everybody reapply for roles and titles and then be part of DevOps. But the biggest problem was that they wanted to do that for all the departments, 5,000 people, before May 2013. So that was for me impossible because it was just we took 2 years to get 800 people to gradually adopt and implement Scrum. You can't do the same for 5,000 people in 6 months time. That is impossible. That is then the true impatience of management. They've seen the success, they've finally seen the value, thanks to Amir, by the way, and then they wanted to go too quickly. And I wasn't involved in that anymore, but I felt like this is the perfect time to now document what we have been doing because I have a belief that this new approach is probably not really going to work. It was also um, another problem with that was that it totally became top down. Remember, Amir sent out a signal. There was a bottom-up signal. People spoke up. No problem, no hesitance, whatever. It had no direction. It was not top-down. It was not bottom-up. That full department was engaged and inspired and motivated. And then it turned into top-down. The top CIO mandating, instructing, directing everybody to say you have to reapply. And as from May 2013, we will be doing DevOps with 5,000 people. It just doesn't work like that. So you can still look up that paper. It's also my website, by the way, as part of resources and papers. Um, but what was so important for me, what were my learnings? That idea of iterative incremental growth. I'm still standing by that. Do it step by step. You could call it use Scrum to adopt Scrum because Scrum is all about iterative incremental development. Introduce Scrum in an iterative incremental way too. That is crucial, and I still totally stand by that. Um, what later on a lot inspired, unfortunately, by ING is that all those companies started doing what they call agile transformations. And as from day one to day two, now everybody has to be agile. They all are put through the same classes, the same certifications. They all have to apply the same practices. They all have to do sprints of 2 weeks, and all of their sprints have to start and end on the same date. I talked about last week. That is sort of what I call industrializing your Scrum to death. That is not the same as this. And use Scrum as it is. Just use Scrum. It is the engine of change. It is an engine for your development. It's the kernel upon which you can rebuild your organization. So step by step and just keep doing Scrum. I think keep doing Scrum also assures some sense of stability. So ING gave up the step-by-step approach. ING suddenly went for DevOps. We had built up lots of experience. I remember I was doing a lot of classes at ING by then. PSM as well as PSPO. And I remember almost the fear in people's voices when they said, Gunther, what is going to happen now? Next year we all have to be DevOps, but this is a Scrum class. How does that relate? What is going to happen? Do we have to learn things again and so on? So it created a lot of unrest within the workforce. That was not needed. But I still remember that involvement of Amir, so important. So important. He facilitated the change, he supported the change, he was able to refrain up to some point of intervening using his hierarchical position and so on. Obviously, he did that a couple of times, but still, that involvement of Amir was crucial. It's also the reason why we went back to only working with Amir and not with the other CIOs. So think about that. In the large, keep doing it step by step. Just use Scrum, use it as it is, and maybe look for a sponsor. might be really helpful. So my lessons from that period. Using Scrum as it is was for me not easy, but still having done Scrum for 7, 8 years in a row, I was able to just stand my ground. I could say, yeah, okay, so what problem are we trying to solve? Why not just do it like this? Just Scrum. We've got accountabilities in place. You don't have to invent things, add complexities to that. But that was really helpful. That's also why I try to say to people sometimes, certainly young people, take your time. Please be impatient. That is fine. I'm impatient too. But if I hadn't gone through that period of 7 years of just applying Scrum in different environments with different teams for different types of organizations, I would never have been able to be that person to guide a large organization like ING in this adoption of Scrum. So sometimes it's okay to take your time. Now, shortly after writing that paper, I first published it via Scrum the Talk, by the way. Um, by that time, by the end of December 2012, I was a little bit overwhelmed with work. In that sense, I still like to say that I was combining three full-time jobs at the same time. So I was a professional Scrum trainer, doing lots of trainings for Capgemini. Because there was this, because with our work at ING, it created what I still call a Scrum boom in the Netherlands. Suddenly, Rabobank, ABN AMRO, Achmea, insurance companies, certainly in the financial world, they all wanted to be as successful as ING, or at least as successful that ING claimed it was. It's not always the same. And they all wanted to do that too. So there was a lot of demand for Scrum. We quickly were able at Scrum to talk to ramp up the number of trainers. The Netherlands became a Scrum to Talk market because of that. And so all those companies. So I was a PST doing trainings for the Capgemini Academy. They have their own academy. Um, there were times that I did about 2 classes per week in Amsterdam, living in Antwerp. At some point in time, I remember for myself that I stopped going on a hotel because my kids started revolting a lot at home, and my wife was the victim of that because I was always away. So I started doing that, traveling back and forth from Antwerp to Amsterdam, coming back in the evening. It's crazy times. That was one aspect. I called myself within Capgemini. I said at some point of time, I'm gonna call myself the global Scrum leader within Capgemini until the day I meet somebody who knows more about Scrum than I do, and then I'll resign. But never found that person. But I felt like, let's be very difficult. Guillaume will know, very difficult for me as a Belgian to be really arrogant and whatever outspoken. But still, I called myself. Man, we have channels within Capgemini, and I travel to other countries and talk to people and so on. So being global Scrum leader was a big part of it too. And then next to that, I was already also what we called stewarding professional Scrum courseware for Scrum Talk. I was working at Capgemini, but I was teaching classes, and as I am very impatient. Oh, this exercise, we could reformulate this, or we could do that, and we can do that. So every time I did a class, sometimes up to twice a week, I sent a bunch of potential improvements to Scrum to Talk because I sort of so at some point of time, Ken and his son-in-law Alex Armstrong, a wonderful guy, came back. Gunther, you know what? We're a small company. I think by that 7, 8 people maybe. We can't digest all the changes that you suggest. They all look fine. What if we asked you to be the steward of this and then take care of the courseware too? So I was doing sort of three full-time jobs. And in March 2013, I was meeting with Ken again in Amsterdam, having an afternoon chat before we had the day after the face-to-face. Um, and 2 days later, we decided to go work together. So I moved to Scrum the Talk, gave up the beautiful titles that I had gained at Capgemini, like global, whatever types of things, principal consultant, whatever, and moved to Scrum the Talk. I left Scrum the Talk in 2016. because Scrum Talk doesn't do consulting, we didn't want to have any conflicts with our trainers that were consultants and coaches. So we didn't do that. We didn't do that as Scrum Talk, and I started missing that. I wanted to be out there again. I wanted to have my feet on the ground again, work with teams and so on. I was missing that too much. I had a wonderful job maintaining courseware, creating assessments. Yeah, it's also a nasty assessment questions that you might run into. Um, but I missed being out there too much. So I went out, left my exclusive work with Ken, my partnership with Ken, and working as a director for Scrum Talk. And by accident, shortly after doing that, I was asked by a company, and I can say that by now, it's a long time ago, it was Air France KLM, so the group in the Netherlands. I've just anonymously called it a Dutch airline company because I've never asked for permission to mention their name, but whatever. I remember in 2011, might have been 2012, my memory is very flawed, but I think it was 2011, I facilitated the first ever PSPO class at KLM. So not Air France KLM, but KLM themselves in near Amsterdam. And in 2016, the lady that had asked for that PSPO class contacted me again to help them out. What was the problem? Um, they wanted to rebuild their frequent flyer program. That was Air France KLM. It's called Blue, whatever, something with blue. And they wanted to create it totally from scratch, recreate it. Because they also wanted to move from purely frequent flyer, meaning collecting and gathering points through miles and so on. They wanted to go to what they call the customer loyalty program. Just to give an indication of what that meant, it might mean that imagine you would only fly once a year. If you would take that flight once a year with KLM, it wouldn't make you a frequent flyer, but it would make you a loyal customer. So they wanted to reward that more. So they had to recreate that program. They've been working on it already for a few years. um, ideas, roadmaps, and so on, plans, ambitions, whatever. And then I don't know what happened, but probably at some point of time, somebody woke up and thought about we have to actually implement this. We have to create it, we have to develop it, launch it, and whatever. Um, and if you look at our current processes and procedures, sort of their internal, let's say, methodology that they had to follow, they realized it was so it was June 2016. They realized, oh my God, this is going to take us 4 years' time following our own processes, and we don't have that because our new program has to be live because of EU regulations. It has to be live on the 1st of January. And that is sort of why they felt, okay, let's ask Gunther, let's do this with Scrum, this sort of impossible challenge. So it was really fun. So we started working on it as from July, um, June and July. And the first thing we did, I remember doing a story mapping workshop. They had roadmaps and ideas in mind. And I remember doing only an afternoon of a story mapping workshop with them, with people in France connected via remote communication. And the funny thing is, already so many beautiful ideas popped up during that session that all those beautiful people that had been working on it, thinking about it for 2 years in a row, hadn't come up with yet. So again, the power of probably heuristic method, I don't know. But in the end, we had a product backlog of 300 items. And it was already pretty clear that this is not all going to work out in that 1 year and a half that we have. And the next thing we did in July, we went to Paris because to give you an idea, how was Air France KLM organized? A lot of business people, product management business people were based in Amsterdam. Project management, the PMO and so on, was all based in Paris. And most of the development that we were going to need was in the south of France. I think in Toulouse. In that workshop, brought some of those people together, and then we did a kickoff in Paris. Um, no problem to fly over there because it was an airline company, so that was convenient. We brought together for 2 days all the team members, about 40 people that had to be organized in teams, and all major stakeholders. I think a group of about 50 people for 2 days in Paris. And I remember the surprise on the, let's say, the peasants again, the normal employees like ourselves. They had no idea what was happening because in general, when they had to go to those types of events, it meant 2 days in a row sitting, listening to people reading out PowerPoints to them. And I didn't do that. I didn't use a single PowerPoint. So I asked the product owners to explain to the people the idea, the ambitions of the rewrite or the recreation of the platform. They talked with each other. They were people from IT management and so on. We asked them to, in the end of those 2 days, we asked them to divide themselves into teams in a couple of steps. Stakeholders were there. The product owner was listening to the team members and the form teams about ideas for the product backlog. So the product backlog was updated again. So from the roadmap via the story mapping, we had this product backlog already. Story mapping delivered a lot of new ideas. Again, new ideas came out of the group and so on. All live interaction conversation. It took at least a few hours for people to really get into it because they were really big company were really not used to it. And then I don't know if people, I don't know what countries you're all from, but in Belgium and in France, we really find yearly holidays really important. So there was nothing we could do in August because everybody was taking the holidays and so on. So we started up in September. We started with 4 teams, every team managing a specific value stream within the new platform. And we did it in what I had described in my book in 2013 already as multi-team Scrum. So 40 people, about 35, 40 people organized in 4 teams. Um, one of the teams felt like not doing Scrum. They wanted to do Kanban. And I said, okay, no problem. But in the end, they did participate in the retrospectives and so on, and the reviews and so on. So without knowing it, they were still actually doing Scrum, but it's okay. They call it Kanban. Um, in the beginning, we wanted to have shared reviews, shared retrospective, shared sprint planning. Um, and we wanted to do that in a sort of rotating system from Amsterdam to Paris to Toulouse. But as the majority of the people were based in Toulouse anyhow, just after the sprint already, we decided to, from now on, just do that in Toulouse. So everybody traveled to Toulouse, where we ended the sprint with a review retrospective with the 4 teams together, one big room with separate conversations and so on, dynamic, just finding it out on the spot. We didn't add anything to Scrum. What was beautiful also the fact that we had that one product owner. So the lady a long time ago that did that PSPO class with me or asked me to do that PSPO class was now the product owner. She was also, let's say, the manager of the platform. And that was really cool. She was again like Amir, she was open, she had a managerial hierarchical position, but she didn't abuse that. She was open for ideas, inputs, and so on. She did a really great job in motivating people, inspiring people, and just telling them what to do. So it really was beautiful. So in November, after only 3 sprints of 3 weeks, if I remember well, we actually had an actual working version of the platform being built, not being able to release it yet. Sprint reviews without PowerPoints, without paperwork, without bureaucracy, and so on. We're doing it in this setup. So we had one product backlog for the platform. We had 4 teams pulling work from that product backlog. Um, every team also had a sort of proxy product owner. Now, there's a little story behind that. So I remember us starting with 4 teams and only one product owner. Now, the people in Paris mainly, PMO, project management people and so on, or often also business analysts, at the start, they were just part of the development team. By then, it was still called development team in Scrum. Now it's called developers. They were just part of development team. And I can understand those people, but it felt for them, it felt like a demotion. So the opposite of a promotion. They felt like they were being demoted, although their salaries remained the same and so on. They felt like, yeah. So they almost revolted, and so we call them product owners too. I don't really care because there was this really great, beautiful product owner managing the whole anyhow. So every team had its own product owner, a former project manager, people, business analysts in the team, and then IT people in Toulouse. It was working like a charm. They amazed themselves. They had no idea for themselves that they were able to do it like this. Now, it started going wrong. Um, so by what happened by the end of 2016, so somewhere in November, I had a 6 months contract with them for external coaching and consulting. And that lady who was the product owner, she had already been working on a new opportunity within KLM then, and she felt really sorry because she had never expected this to go so smooth, and she totally loved it. But also she had this new opportunity that she didn't want to reject, so she still went for that new opportunity. So as a manager of that platform, she was replaced by another manager. And I remember having a talk with that person. Um, but in the meantime, something else had happened too. So there was a new manager of the platform. In the meantime, also the um, how to call it, sort of the higher up layers of the IT organization had heard about the fact that we were doing Scrum to rebuild or recreate this platform. And they protested. Why? Because the official norm, the official standard for agile development within KLM and in the end Air France KLM was safe. So a new manager had only done safe, was now manager of this platform, was in my view supposed to be the new product owner, only experience with safe, and then also pressure from the higher up layers of the IT organization that we have to convert this thing to safe. And I almost killed myself. I almost stabbed myself in the heart by saying to that new manager, yeah, but you know what? We do the simplest version of save. I almost choked when I was saying that, but I really wanted to be political and diplomatic, no problem. I want to keep this going. Yeah, but you know what? This is safe, but this is like the simplest version of safe. What safe calls a programming element. We have that every sprint and whatever. So I was trying to twist things, didn't work out. It had to be converted to safe, and for whatever reason, my contract was not extended. I don't know. Probably not the right safe certifications. I don't know. It wasn't extended, and then the problem was not just the fact that safe. I still can't wrap my head around it because we were working fluent, smoothly, fast, happy people, and then it had to become slow. And suddenly it had to be slowed down, whatever, a strange thing. But the biggest problem was actually that managers felt like not being the product owner. They felt like I am the manager. So that construction with one product owners and four proxies sort of deteriorating by that one product owner not being a product owner anymore. Now four proxy product owners having to sort of go manage the work. So in the end, it slowed down. I think they didn't go live on the 1st of January 2018, but at least no more than 6 months later, which was okay by the European Commission in the end and so on, because they know these things. So lessons, urgency, um, that finding, oh my God, that was sort of the idea also with ING, and even when long time ago started with the extreme programming, that sense of urgency really opens up possibilities. So as Scrum Masters, or as you say, Andrea, as Hope acting as Scrum caretakers, look out for that. Use, build, capitalize on potential urgencies because it creates open minds for people also in the hierarchy to apply a different way of working. So urgency was really helpful. Again, simplicity. We were just doing Scrum. 4 teams, shared sprint reviews, shared sprint retrospectives, and then individual sprint retrospectives. I think Sandra, you will remember this from my workshop of multi-team Scrum. So just Scrum and that product owner, really, really essential. That manager of the platform was a incredibly great product owner. The new manager felt like, no, I'm not going to be the almost daily, not going to pick up that almost daily product owner role. And that lady being the manager of the platform, she obviously had a mandate. So she had the insights to take decisions, she had the willingness to take decisions, and she was accepted to take decisions. So really, really beautiful. So think about that. But again, naivety helped me, saved me, because I've never worked at that scale. I had worked with large organizations, but no more than 1 or 2 teams working together. 4 teams, that urgency, the pressure, delivery pressure, and so on. And I just felt like, oh, let's do what I think I know and see where we will get. And I still remember the thing that excited me the most is the happiness in people's eyes, the amazement over what they were able to do. Because Air France, KLM, by the way, I can assure you, bringing some Dutch people together with French people in the same rooms is not always easy. Sometimes there's a sort of an attitude difference. Think of sort of government attitude. So might be helpful. But we just went for it. And that's again, call it naivety. I like now to call it sort of, give it a more scientific name, call it heuristics. Just go for it, try it. Urgency helps. Remember, the urgency of our extreme program in 2003 was because the project hadn't started and we were already late. That opened up people's mind to a very different way of working. So those were 2 stories of naivety that I still wanted to share. And I felt like I've grown into the habit of trying to pick for myself a sort of central core theme that I want to speak about. So over the past 4, 5, 6 years, I've been talking about engagement of people. I've been talking about what I now call the future state of Scrum, reimagining your Scrum, reorganizing around Scrum, um, bringing lots of things together. I still need to find some time somewhere to make that a topic of a new book. I've started calling it moving your Scrum downfield, and now just calling it Scrum downfield, not to share it how to call it. Um, I was recently invited to come talk at a few organizations um, about Scrum, and one of them asked me to talk about Scrum without talking about Scrum too much, which is um, not so easy, and certainly not in the least because I don't know anything else. I couldn't talk about anything else anyhow. And then I remembered by the beginning of the Corona crisis 2020, when I had to digest what was happening in the world and what I was going to do with my life and trading and so on. And some people did crazy stuff during the Corona crisis. Some people collected toilet paper. I don't know if you remember that. Certainly in Belgium, some people, so supermarkets had no more toilet paper because people were like hamstring toilet paper. I felt like doing something more productive with my life by then. So I wrote a paper. And why was that? It was inspired by my annoyance. That sometimes something that I try to do in my life, I'm a very unsatisfied, unhappy, whatever person. I hate a lot of things that are happening in the world, but I try to convert that into something positive. And by then, I had this big frustration over people debating and discussing the Scrum Guide all over and over again. And those terms and what do they mean with that and so on. And I felt like, you know what, heuristics, you can only learn Scrum by going out and playing. You can't find out what Scrum is about, what Scrum can do for you by asking other people or discussing, let's say, the instruction manual. So I wrote a paper, and by then I called it Moving Your Scrum Downfield. So I was building on that theme already. I've been expanding it in the years after. And in that paper, I try to describe what I call the 6 essential traits to make your Scrum come to life, or indications that your Scrum actually is coming to life. And I wanted to step away from um, the heated terminology, whatever debates around Scrum and the Scrum Guide. So I felt like I'm going to try to describe what makes Scrum work. And I've highlighted 6 topics or 6 traits that I like to call them. You will recognize that they are actually based a lot on my naivety and my experience because it's about simplicity. It's about Scrum's DNA, what I call the underlying management principles of Scrum, meaning self-organization and empiricism. So rather looking at the meetings, events, look at why. It's about accountability. It's about transparency, product backlog, but also about creating a flow of value. It's about closing the loops. Last week, extreme programming, I told it it's closing the loops. More loops than meet the eye, meaning even within the frequency of a daily scrum, even on top of that, closing the loops more regularly with test-driven development, with pair programming, with automatic code reviews, with automatic CIs and so on, with performance testing, closing the loop, and obviously enacting the scrum values. So I updated that paper in 2023. And just to be honest, it also had to do with my frustration of things that were happening with an envisioned update of the Scrum Guide by then. I had backed out of that whole update because of my annoyance with the way it was going, and I converted my energy into creating this paper. Yeah. So and for those companies that want me to one company or want me to talk about Scrum without talking about Scrum too much, I'm going to highlight focus on these things. This is what makes Scrum come to life, and in the end, I believe this is what will make any way of working come to life. Yeah. And I already wanted to share that here with you guys. So the simplicity of Scrum. Scrum's DNA, demonstrating accountability. I think that is important because you don't want to demand accountability of people. Remember, intrinsic motivation. Intrinsically motivated people will demonstrate accountability. They will spontaneously show that they are accountable professionals. And that is the type of environment that we want to create. An environment in which people will stand up and demonstrate that they are accountable professionals without us demanding it from them, without us telling them, you should be accountable. And then think about that fluid accountability that we had in our first years. So this is what I wanted to share. Maybe next year I'll do a next some meetup again in going through that, sort of maybe piloting that class. So that's sort of my story for today. I want to really thank you. This is a little message that we've been sending out across the world as a family around the world. Um, because despite my eternal descent, I'm always unhappy and not always, I always look, no, that's not good. I'm whatever nitty gritty. I don't like it. It has to be better. There has to be a better way. Always trying to be positive in the end. Nobody's attending my class. Okay, we're almost on the edge of bankruptcy at home. Can't feed my family. Let's try to be positive anyhow. So keep creating some good karma in next year. Please care better, care more, that be engaged, show that engagement. That's sort of my message to the world and to you guys. And remember, um, feel free to attend my classes. I've got this Caretaker discount. You can use it. You can share it with your friends. I'm totally fine with that. You can find my classes on my website. So please share it with friends. In your organizations, we can do in-house classes online. Lots of things are possible. So thank you very much. I think almost everybody stayed. I haven't been counting, but I think okay. I don't know. I think I prefer starting a session with 10 people and ending a session with 10 people than starting a session with 100 people and also ending with 10 people. I think I prefer that because I've got this idea, um, always quality over quantity. And I think I'm appealing to really yeah, courageous people that are willing to challenge the status quo out there. Because status quo is what we're ending up in. There's a standstill in Scrum. So we have to sort of keep the ball going.